Hi, everybody. I think it's the end of week 2, right? Or maybe this is week 1. Sorry, I get kind of confused. Anyhow, I hope you had a nice Labor Day. And as you can see, I spent a good part of my time reading discussion boards and Dropbox assignments. So I thought this time around for teaching, I've never done this before, but would try to do more videos just so that you can get kind of a better feel for myself, and it's just a way for me to share thoughts and such with you. But I wanted to just kind of go through the discussion board questions and just kind of highlight some thoughts and where I was really impressed with everyone's work, and then maybe some thoughts on the grading. I wanted to talk about the Dropbox also, and just overall grading. So if you have any questions at all, just please email or give me a call. I'm around, so I'm happy to help any way I can. So this week the discussion board was kind of a bit of a nebulous topic. Hopefully you weren't too frustrated by it, but it's just to kind of get us all thinking about what is this thing called leadership that we spend so much time thinking about, talking about, and wishing for, and wishing we had more of it in ourselves and in others. So I've studied leadership for 25 years. Most of it was in response to working with really bad leaders. So, and then trying to figure out what is it about their leadership that's not good, and how do I build that within myself, because I had a desire to lead if the opportunity would be presented, and over my career I've had the opportunity to do that several times. So so the first question we talked about is leadership a role or a position? And many of you are like right on target. Leadership is actually both. It can be a role in that it's a verb. It's something that you do. I love many of your comments about, bottom line, leadership is action. It's doing something. I had a really good presentation from an administrator years and years ago that said that the 2 top skills of leaders is to have vision and the ability to take risk in the action to realize that vision. And I kind of held on to that for a long time, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So leadership is a role, so it's a verb, and it's also a noun in that it can be a position. The beauty is when those 2 things come together, but to assume that because you have the position is that others are going to follow you. If that's something that you have to earn, you have to create respect for yourself. You can't demand respect, and make yourself worthy to follow. So, and I think that there's hopefully a lot about what this class will be about is understanding how to go about doing that, becoming this what is often referred to as a authentic leader, or somebody who is in touch with themselves and understands how others may perceive them, and can work with those perceived limitations and overcome those, so that all of the staff and people and organizations can follow. So I believe leadership is both a role and a position. So is there what's all the buzz about leadership? What's all the hype about it? I think in our current day and age there is a lot of hype about leadership, more or less because of a lack of it. I've worked in many organizations that just had a lack of leadership. That even the people with the titles weren't leading. They were busy managing. We used to kind of analyze the organizations a lot, and say that they were busy rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, they were so busy managing the details that they couldn't see that the organization was heading for disaster, and they were unwilling to step up to the plate, develop that vision, and then take the risk to see the vision played out by action. So anyhow, I think quite a few of you address that also, is that there is kind of a general lack of leadership in a lot of organizations, and some would say at the political level, international level, within your own operating units. Leadership is a hot commodity, and I think generally we're kind of suffering from a lack of that right now. So because of that, I think that's kind of a general hype. Those who are pursuing leadership for the status, the money that may come with it, the titles, I think they perceive, well, leaders are better than managers, so of course I want to be the best, so I'm going to pursue leadership. I think most leaders, if they haven't been managers before, have a high respect for what managers do. I don't know any organization on earth that can survive without one or the other. So you have to have solid management. And I like the text view of knowing how to do things right, where leaders know what to do. So, I guess that's kind of my perception on that. I do think that there's a difference between managers and leaders, and I think we've kind of highlighted on that already. One is not better than the other. Both are needed, but an organization cannot survive on just either. So that creates a real tension within an organization if you have one without the other. A lot of frustration and tension in organizations. So can leaders be made? And again, this kind of ties in that Dropbox assignment. So I was introduced to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator back in the early 90s. Early 90s. Try to think about that for a second. And have invested a lot of time in learning and using that tool. And it, I believe, has helped me a great deal in my professional and personal life in trying to understand and navigate these relationships within personal and professional environments. So let me kind of address this from a type perspective. So when you're thinking about somebody who can create vision and that has the personality that can support risk taking, typically you would look at somebody who has perhaps more of a big picture or intuitive perspective, and somebody who that ability to take risk. I guess that could fall between perception and judgment. It's difficult for people with judging preferences to take risks because they're kind of holding on to the plan. But usually big picture comes in with that visioning, where people managing detail typically are more sensing preferences. So to say, our leader, can you teach leadership? Absolutely. My preferences with regards to the MBTI is big picture. That does not mean that I'm incapable of managing detail or appreciating detail. In fact, I probably appreciate it more because it's more of a struggle for me. But I can't just lead based on my big picture perspective. So I've had to develop both sides of me. The big picture is something that comes naturally to me. So right now I'm working with lots and lots of different individuals and departments and different positions at the university and outside the university to help create a vision for this program. But in the meantime, I still have to manage the program. So I'm doing both, and it requires skills in both. One comes more naturally to me, the big picture part of it, and the other part is requires me to really work on the development of that skill. So if you're the opposite and you have a lot of you're detail oriented, which a lot of you when sharing your type with me stated that, in fact I think everyone said that sensing was their preference, that means that the detail comes more easily to you, which is awesome. I mean, because I struggle with it. So does that mean that you're limited and you can only be a manager because you have sensing preferences and you are comfortable with detail? Absolutely not. So you can develop that big picture thinking in yourself. It'll take more time and more effort, but I think participating in this program is an outstanding move towards that, and then constantly pulling yourself outside of your comfort zone of managing what's comfortable to you, to pushing yourself to think about problems from a bigger perspective. So pulling things back out and saying, okay, I've got all this detail, but if I look at it, what does it mean? If you start connecting dots and you look at, well, there's this outcome from this department and this from that, and there's this challenge in this department, is there any common themes between these? That's what big picture people do. More intuitive. It's not anything that I set out to be good at. It's just something I was born with. So where I have to force myself is to take the big picture and to break it down into details. And that, trust me, is hard. I work with a number of people, build a team around me of people who are good at that, and they kind of help me learn to break things down into steps. So anyhow, so I definitely believe that leadership can be taught, for sure. I think you naturally, as long as you're, not keeping yourself too tightly close to what you're naturally good at, you're constantly kind of trying to expand yourself and develop yourself, I think you naturally will develop that other side of yourself naturally over time. But I think you can also do other things now in your career to really support success in there. And the exercise I often refer to is learning to connect dots. So take several different indicators around your position and start to connect them and say, now what do these have in common? What does this mean, overall? And kind of stretch yourself to think that way. So anyhow, so what is the importance of understanding personality type? So the course that I often teach in these in programs, in my prior program, and I hope to get it into this program too, is actually content that uses the MBTI, and it's called FlexCare. And I just want to, I kind of alluded to this in some of my comments to you, my feedback. But the idea of FlexCare is that you first introduce the student to psychological type theory, and you work them through trying to understand what are their preferences. And at the end of a couple hours of training, students can usually walk away with a pretty good understanding of what those 4 letters are, and I feel fairly comfortable that they're somewhat descriptive of them on the average day. I mean, we all have our good days and bad days, and the days that we're more ourselves and less ourselves and such. But on an average day, this is kind of what I identify with from a preference perspective. And that's an awesome first step. It is really important for you to know, what you're comfortable with in a kind of a description of yourself, because then you can use that to understand how others might perceive you. So, for example, you probably have picked up on this, clearly an extrovert. So I embrace my extroversion. I like being extroverted. I see all the benefits of being extroverted. However, over life, I know how others may perceive me as an extrovert. So I know that some people might, consider me, a talker, and that I don't know how to be quiet, that I interrupt people, that I can somewhat intimidate people by my loud voice and how fast I speak, and that I use my hands. And I know it can come off as very intimidating, sometimes very offensive to some people. So is it helpful for me to know that? Yeah, because as I interact with people, I can pay attention to how they're responding to me, and I can see that if my extroversion is getting in the way of me be able to connect with that other person or communicate with them, I can kind of tone it down a bit. And because I understand what introversion is, I can try to tone down my extroversion and kind of embrace the more introverted side of myself. So number one, it's important to know who you are, just for your own sanity, that you know how you prefer to interact with the world. Number two, you understand how others might perceive you, and you can kind of use that to facilitate more productive conversations, more productive relationships with people. So those are three good benefits of understanding your personality. The fourth and final one is a huge tool for people who are in management and leadership roles, and I used to teach this actually more to the clinical people, because their role in connecting with patients and other members of the team has a dramatic effect on people being able to return to health and embrace treatment and own their own health. So the fourth is this concept, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is this concept of flexing. So if I'm in a conversation with someone and I can kind of see that I'm not connecting with them and the communication's not working, I have a tool where I can learn to flex to match their communication needs versus my own. So if I'm interacting with somebody as an extrovert and I can very, very clearly see that because of their responses to me that they're more quiet, they tend to have long pauses in communication, they tend to talk softer, most of their answers to my questions are one word, or maybe even a nod, then I could fairly easily see that I might be interacting with an introvert if I'm not connecting with them. So I'm not seeing them engage in the content, or if I've known them for a while and I'm not seeing any changes in behavior, then I might want to try to use more of an introverted approach to connect with them. So what I could do, especially if it was an employee situation, I could send them some questions for them to think about prior to our next meeting. So I'll say, Bob, I'd like to meet with you on Friday. Here's a couple things that I'd really like to talk with you about. I'd appreciate you giving them some prior, some thoughts, and then when we get together, we'll be ready to talk. I can also learn to be quiet. So when I ask the question, when Bob and I meet, I can be quiet and really give them the opportunity to express, instead of risking interrupting them. Every time I interrupt an introvert, I know I run the risk of shutting them down, where they will not talk to me because they aren't feeling respected or valued. So that's something that I can do. And perhaps through just that one preference scale, that EI, I might be able to create this stronger connection with Bob, and maybe take the conversation to a point where I can empower Bob to really embrace that behavior change that I need him to do to be successful within the organization and to help the overall team achieve goals, and skip through the sunflower fields with unicorns chasing us and such. So anyhow, that's called flex. So I think there's 4 solid benefits for understanding your personality with regards to the MBTI. I'm most familiar with that tool. I think there's a lot of depth and value. It's used all over the world. It's a solid tool to invest time into understanding. The other tools mentioned in the textbook are, I wouldn't say they're not helpful, but they just aren't as far reaching, and I don't think they have as much of a following as the MBTI does. So, but again, that's my perspective. So anyhow, outstanding work by everybody. For the most part, I saw some really solid work in the original post. A couple people was kind of a little disappointed that they didn't participate more in the discussion. So I might have counted off just a tiny bit on that. Again, writing clearly, so make sure you take your time to review your post so that what you're writing is clear. If you need more time on work, I'm happy to give that. It's more difficult with the discussion boards because everybody's kind of relying on the timeliness of those. But if you need to kind of push the Dropbox assignments off a little bit to do the discussions, just let me know and I can give you more time on the Dropbox assignment. So I don't have an issue doing that at all. I do require that you ask beforehand, though. If you're late in posting, I won't accept the work. So that's just kind of a thing that I'm trying to really reinforce to you as leaders. We have to be very conscientious of due dates and timelines. So anyhow, overall, excellent first week, and here we go. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm around. Hopefully these videos are helpful. If not, let me know and I'll stop doing them too. So have a great week, and I will talk with you next week. Take care. Bye.